It was a hot summer evening in Houston, Texas, in 1965. The streets of the quiet suburban neighborhood were calm, the hum of cicadas the only sound breaking the stillness. Inside a modest brick house, Fred and Edwina Rogers, an elderly couple, were living what seemed to be an ordinary life. But behind the closed doors of their home, something unthinkable had unfolded. June 23rd, 1965 started like any other day. Neighbors went about their routines, unaware of the macabre discovery that would soon shatter their sense of security. The Rogers newspapers were piling up, and an unsettling silence surrounded their usually peaceful home. Concerned, a neighbor called the police to perform a welfare check, a decision that would lead to one of the most disturbing and enduring mysteries in crime history. Officers entered the Rogers home, expecting to find an aging couple in need of assistance. Instead, they uncovered a nightmare. The house appeared unnervingly clean, almost sterile. But as they moved to the kitchen, the air grew heavy with dread. It wasn't until they opened the refrigerator that the chilling truth came to light. A discovery so gruesome, it would etch itself into the annals of unsolved crime forever. This wasn't just a murder. It was a puzzle that would haunt investigators for decades. It was only when one officer opened the vegetable crisper and found Edwina Rogers' severed head staring back at him that the truth revealed itself. The meat in the fridge was not livestock. It was the dismembered remains of Fred and Edwina Rogers, meticulously cleaned and arranged. The scene was cold, clinical, and horrifying. The prime suspect. Where was Charles Rogers? As officers surveyed the home, one glaring detail stood out. The Rogers' son, Charles Frederick Rogers, was missing. A 43-year-old reclusive man, Charles lived with his parents, but was known to interact with them as little as possible, often communicating through notes slid under his locked bedroom door. Charles's room was a stark contrast to the rest of the house. While the rest of the home seemed oddly pristine, his room was bare, almost as if he had been planning to leave. His personal belongings were gone, and there was no sign of his current whereabouts. Investigators immediately considered him the prime suspect. Charles's background painted a picture of a highly intelligent, yet deeply enigmatic man. A former Navy pilot and geophysicist, he was fluent in multiple languages and reportedly worked for top organizations. However, his life had taken a sharp turn toward isolation. Neighbors described him as a loner who rarely left the house. The strained relationship between Charles and his parents, particularly over financial disputes, added fuel to the fire of suspicion. Were they victims of an intruder, or was the danger closer to home? The couple's quiet, unassuming life masked secrets that would unravel under scrutiny. As investigators examined the Rogers home, they found themselves puzzled by the lack of physical evidence. The house was unnaturally clean, as though someone had scrubbed away every trace of the crime. Forensic experts concluded that the murders likely occurred in the upstairs bedroom. Yet there was no blood trail leading to the kitchen, where the bodies were dismembered. Fred Rogers' body bore signs of extreme violence, with his eyes gouged out, a detail that seemed both personal and symbolic. Edwina had been bludgeoned to death with a hammer. Their remains had been carefully drained of blood before being dismembered, suggesting a high degree of planning and a chilling level of composure from the killer. Adding to the strangeness, there were no signs of forced entry, indicating that the murderer was someone the couple knew, someone who had unrestricted access to their home. This pointed investigators back to Charles, but with no physical evidence to tie him directly to the crime, they were left with more questions than answers. Who was Charles Rogers, and what could drive him to such a monstrous act? Friends and former colleagues described him as a man of extraordinary intellect, but one who kept to himself. After serving in the Navy, where he honed his skills as a pilot, Charles worked as a geophysicist. However, he left his career under mysterious circumstances, retreating into a life of seclusion. Reports suggested that Charles had grown increasingly paranoid in the years leading up to the murders. He was rumored to have ties to espionage, with some claiming he was involved in covert government operations. This, combined with his estranged relationship with his parents, painted a complex and unsettling picture. What if the truth was more bizarre than anyone imagined? The Icebox Murders inspired theories ranging from Cold War conspiracies to deeply personal betrayals. One of the leading theories was that Charles killed his parents over financial disputes. Fred and Edwina reportedly controlled Charles's finances, and their frequent arguments were no secret to neighbors. But did money alone explain the sheer brutality of the crime? The Icebox Murders have inspired countless theories, ranging from plausible to outright bizarre. The most straightforward explanation is that Charles killed his parents in a fit of rage, possibly over their control of his finances or their domineering behavior. But the precision of the crime suggested premeditation, leaving room for darker interpretations. One of the more outlandish theories connects Charles Rogers to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. According to this theory, Charles was a CIA operative involved in the conspiracy to kill Kennedy. Proponents argue that Charles killed his parents to silence them, fearing they knew too much about his activities. While this theory is tantalizing, it lacks concrete evidence and remains speculative. Others believe Charles fled the country, using his intelligence and skills as a pilot to create a new identity. Some claim he lived out the rest of his life in South America, blending into the shadows. Despite extensive searches, no definitive trace of Charles Rogers has ever been found. While the perfect cleanup of the crime scene suggests a calculated effort to evade detection, some theorists argue that critical evidence might have been missed. During the investigation, the technology available in 1965 was rudimentary compared to today's forensic advancements. Modern techniques like DNA testing, luminol blood detection, and digital footprint analysis could have potentially shed light on the mystery. For example, neighbors reported hearing strange noises in the days leading up to the discovery of the bodies, details that might point to the exact timeline of the murders. Additionally, rumors of Charles Rogers' connections to intelligence agencies raise questions about whether external forces intervened to suppress certain leads. Could unidentified fingerprints, unexplored financial transactions, or overlooked witness statements have held the key to solving this case? The idea that the truth may have been buried alongside the victims adds another layer of intrigue, leaving us to wonder what secrets the Icebox Murders still hold. The Rogers home, once a quiet suburban residence, became a symbol of terror and mystery. The house was eventually torn down, but its dark legacy lingers in the collective memory of Houston. True crime enthusiasts and amateur sleuths continue to dissect the case, hoping to uncover the truth behind one of America's most chilling unsolved murders. For Fred and Edwina Rogers, their tragic end remains a haunting reminder of how little we sometimes know about those closest to us. And for Charles Rogers, whether he was a victim of circumstance or a cold-blooded killer, his disappearance has cemented his place in true crime lore. In the end, the Icebox Murders is not just a story of a horrific crime. It's a reminder of how little we can truly know about those around us. Fred and Edwina Rogers lived an unremarkable life, only to become the center of one of America's most chilling unsolved mysteries. Charles Rogers remains an enigma, his motives and fate shrouded in darkness. As the years pass, the questions persist, keeping the case alive in the hearts of those who seek answers. The Icebox Murders remain a haunting tale, one that freezes the blood and stirs the imagination. What really happened in that quiet Houston home? The truth, perhaps, lies forever locked away, frozen in time like the crime itself.